the connection that you get with your vendors. Everybody can go out to have a coffee with somebody, and that's great. But having people over in your personal space and getting to know somebody more personal, and then seeing how people interact together is really great too. Because then, if your vendors get to know each other really well, then they'll work together well. So then, having that experience of having that same communication on the wedding site the day of is really special too.
Hey everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast, back with another very cool and exciting guest. I'm here with Darren Keala. He is the founder of Events by Darren Keala. He is also the vice president of the Maui Wedding and Event Association. Darren has over 28 years of experience in our beloved industry. And Darren, I'm really happy to have you as a guest here today. Thank you for taking time to do this.
Aloha, Eddie. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you also for navigating the time zone difference between New York City and Hawaii. So, Darren, what I always like to do to kind of start things off is just to kind of let you, as our guest here, introduce yourself. I obviously gave the blurb about who you are, but can you just tell everybody in your own words how you got to be where you currently are in our industry?
Sure, sure. Hello, everyone. As Eddie mentioned, my name's Darren. I was born and raised on Maui in Hawaii, which kind of led to where I am. I started off in the hospitality industry, most like everybody else in Hawaii does. But I started working in a hotel as food and beverage. And from there, started helping with weddings at the hotels. I started doing flowers as a manager for one of the hotels when we would do a wedding, and then opened the floral company. And then from there, kind of started helping my couples that needed help. On an island when you're working with a florist, and they're like, can you guide us in a direction for someone? And then you direct them, and then they come back, and we can't get a hold of anyone. So that kind of led me to getting into the coordination part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joining with a few people on the way, and then now eventually lending on my own, which I really enjoy. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here. Just enjoying helping with weddings has been
That's
kind of
cool,
stuff.
Darren. Very, very cool. And can you tell me a little bit about, as a florist, having that background as a florist, how has that impacted your work as a planner and coordinator?
It's very unusual. So my friends do laugh at me. They can't understand how you can do both, but from the beginning, I've always done both. So I've really enjoyed it. I can't see myself not doing it. And the things I like about it is like I weave everything together, and to me, that's what's more important of how I do it. It's a very memorable kind of thing. So what I try to do, say for instance, a couple does their invitations or her wedding dress. I have them share all these things with me. And what I try to do is when we do the flowers is have the flowers match something that they're using. So like say for instance, the invitations they're sent, there's Monstera and Plumerias on it. We try to include that into the wedding flowers. Or there's a pretty design of a scroll on top of their invitation. So one thing I like is trying to use something like that maybe just the three of us know, the couple and I, and then maybe do like a petal aisle that mimics that, or the lace on her dress that'll mimic that. So those kind of things I love doing, where maybe just the three of us know and nobody else does, but that's just meaningful.
That's so cool. And what would you say, Darren? Because you are, I think, uniquely advantaged in this respect that you have expertise as a florist, and you can bring that into your work when you're planning and executing weddings. What would you say for the majority of our audience out there that doesn't have that sort of combination of skills as a florist and as a planner? What advice would you sort of give people, particularly from the florist viewpoint,
Yes.
to help them plan better weddings?
Nice. So one of my favorite things I realized is, as a florist, speaking directly to the couple is really important.
What do you
That way,
mean?
like, so sometimes, you get a proposal from someone and it's a proposal and then you just accept it. But, there's little details that I feel with my couples are really important
Okay.
because, talking through the proposal, seeing what the couple likes and dislike, speaking about each flower, what they like and dislike about those things. One of my favorite questions I always ask my couples is there any flower that is your favorite? And then, you kind of dig into it a little. And sometimes you find out that, hey, grandma used to love tulips. So maybe that's something we can maybe throw into the bouquet that nobody else will know. Those kind of things I like doing them. But I think, for a lot of couples I've heard before as a florist only was that, well, that wasn't right. We should have understood this part. So, those things I like, just having an extra touch really does help
And
personally a
what
lot.
and on this same kind of note, Darren, I think every planner really wants to be the planner that all the other vendors want to work with, right? Like every planner wants to be that person that like all the vendors know when I'm working with her or him or them, the bases are covered. They're going to handle the unexpected things that inevitably come up. And, whether it's the photographer or the caterer or whomever, the planner wants that vendor to think like, I am comfortable with this person. So, what should planners do to be that planner in the eyes of their florist? Like how can planners just make that killer impression on florists to have the florist say that's my favorite planner?
Yeah, for me, with all of my vendors, that's something that's really important. So being on an island, you get people that reach out to you from all over the world that want to, everybody wants to add Hawaii sometimes to their repertoire of where they can work, which is great. And we love that. But being on an island, there's a lot of great talent here. So my main thing is that with vendors is I have to trust them 100% enough so that even though I share my vendor list with someone, even if I don't work with that couple, I
Mm-hmm.
can still trust that the people I recommend I can let them be and do their own thing, which I do all the time. To me, that's important, having that trust between your vendors. Um, having so one of the things I like doing with my vendors is I wait till we're friends before I put them on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on my list I've at least known for at least 5 or 6 months. A lot of them on there I've known for 20 years. So it does make a really big difference in having that trust with the vendors that you work with. I don't really add anybody right away. I let everyone know that I want to get to know them, just like my couples. I don't have my couples agree to work with me until we come up with a proposal together, which sometimes takes 30 to 60 days. But for me, that's what's important is getting to know my couples first before I work with them.
And are there any like tips that you would give planners vis-a-vis the florist to say like for example, kind of riffing on your point about how it's important to kind of have that direct relationship? Are there any tips like, hey, when you're working with the florist, be sure that you're not cutting the florist out of communications with the client? Again, I'm just intrigued by the fact that you have the florist mindset and the planner all together.
Yeah.
Are there any practical tips you might give planners in terms of how to best deal with their florist?
I think understanding the style of your florist
Mhm.
is really important because so if being in the industry for a while, I if I look at a photo, I can tell who the florist is if we're on an island. So it's really nice to see that. So seeing the different types of florists in your area and their different styles is important. Some florists can do all kinds of different things, which is great. But a lot of florists have a certain style that they'd like to work. But getting to know that would be important as well. because a lot of florists have different tastes.
What do you think makes a florist great? Like from kind of switching the viewpoint instead of I
Mhm.
was thinking before of just like how to be the planner that all the florists want to work with. But when a planner is trying to find the ideal florist for a given wedding, what are some of the criteria that come to your mind that a planner should have in mind to find like an A plus florist for an event?
Hmm. Open communication is always the first
Hmm.
for me. Secondly, I would be, how well they work with others.
Hmm.
That's really important.
Hmm.
Um, those two things, if you like their style, how they, when they show up at an event, how they work with you, those kind of things, how they work with your couples. I guess those things are all important to all of us, I'm sure, to represent not just that florist, but then as well as you and your brand and your company.
Another this question may be a little naive, Darren, but I'm interested in your take.
Sure.
Would you say that if I'm a wedding planner and I find a great florist, I should it's totally okay to kind of slot that florist into all of my weddings, even if I'm doing different styles and different types and all of that? Or would you say it's better as a planner to try to find different florists that meet different styles and to really have a more customized approach where you're picking different florists to match different types of events?
Hmm. That's a good question. I like that because there's different ways for sure.
Okay.
And I guess it would depend on where you live and who you have available. But some florists can do different styles, and some specialize in a different style. So I think that's what's really important. That and yeah, like I mentioned, I think communication would be really key because having a florist that is fantastic but difficult to work with would, yeah, not be great.
Yeah, it sounds like the ideal is really to just find one, maybe a couple more people that you really connect with in terms of like their personality, their work ethic, their values, their communication, and just to kind of build on that relationship. And that the style thing is a little
Yeah,
distant, it's a distant priority relative to those concerns.
for sure, for sure. It's it's always having a good team. Like as a florist, and I have a wedding this weekend, so usually I have about 5 to 7 people in the office that we're working on flowers together. So it's really a lot of fun. So having if we have a bigger wedding, having guest florists come in to help is really a big thing too. Who I choose, and sometimes it's by style, and sometimes it's by you know how working with that person goes.
I love that, Darren. So in our pre-interview, I shared a hypothetical question, and people that listen to our podcast, they've heard it before because this really goes to the crux of what I'm trying to do with our podcast in trying to help other wedding planners like find the success that they're seeking. And basically the question is kind of like this hypothetical where I come to you as a wedding planner that's been in business for a few years. I feel like I'm overworked. I love my job. It's stressful, but I feel like honestly I'm more out of balance in terms of how I'm working and how on top of my affairs and business I feel, and also that I'm not really making as much money just, in terms of profit as I want. And that's really the person, like I really want to give that sort of help to everybody listening. And you had an answer in terms of when I asked you how would you potentially help that person that I've never really heard before around creativity. Can you speak a little bit to that sort of insight and line of thought that you were telling me about in our pre-interview?
Sure, sure. I mean, for and this is true for me because being in the industry that long, I did get bored every once in a while.
Yeah.
So by recreating my creativity was something that really made me push forward. And I mentioned this that at one point, and everybody does this starting off. You have packages A, B, C, and D, which you give them really cute names that your couples pick out. So they choose these packages and you go forward with it. And we used to do it all the time, but I got bored. So what I started to do was take out those packages and I had my couples be creative. I mean, it was a little awkward at first because nobody knew, but having to change that attitude of myself and my couples was a huge thing by having them be more creative, by asking them creative questions. Like, now I ask them different questions like, is there a favorite flower that you like? Is there something that's momentous that is really important to you? But also by seeing that change in me and my couples was a really big thing that made my creativity just better and made me happier. And made my couples happier. I noticed another thing too by being that way. You know, the money aspect, everybody does that. We want to do better, but a lot of people don't think of themselves as being that creative. So by asking for more money, so I think that really does help the two of those things go together.
So let me get this right. So this is really interesting, Darren, because obviously what you're speaking to is the pervasive trend that people, they put some forethought into this. They think about their pricing, blah blah blah, and then they have, in most cases, like a few different packages that they
Mhm.
offer, and people can kind of, the clients can kind of pick between those packages. Um, what you're suggesting is, and don't let me put words in your mouth here if this isn't what you're kind of saying, but what I hear you suggesting is maybe some planners, if they're inclined to do this, can experiment with the idea of having a couple and saying, hey, what else do you want to do here, and kind of letting it grow beyond these
Yes.
predefined boxes. Is that
Yes.
right?
That's right. And that's kind of what I did. So I did it with with a couple, and I said, this is called the dream package.
Okay.
And this is anything you can dream of. Let's do it.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so I did this with this couple, and we did an engagement. He proposed to her. And we were doing flower circles on the ocean, on the beach at the time.
Okay.
And so I was charging like a certain price. And he's like, so if I wanted to double that, what could we do? I was like, wow, I could make it taller. I could make and we just came up with these different new things that I've never done before for a flower
Cool.
circle on the beach. And
Cool.
then when he proposed, then they started planning their wedding. And this is when I came up with that, what dream wedding would you like? And so they kind of turned it on me and asked me if I was to get married,
Oh.
what kind of cool thing would I want to do? And that really kind of set my creativity forward. And I started doing that with a
Wow.
lot of couples
So
to
so let, oh
see
sorry, go ahead, Darren. This is really cool.
to see what their dream would have been if they had no amount of money. So when I do my proposal with flowers, that's something else I like to do. I give them options. So if they share an arch with me, with all the flowers on it, I give them three different options. One is a more economical option, the price of what it costs for what they're showing me, and then I give them a third price of a little more grander kind of option.
So, and I really, I love to kind of get into on this podcast the nuts and bolts of things, because I want people who listen to us to be able to actually, after spending an hour listening to us, I want them to be able to take this information and apply it to their business if they feel like it's something they want to try out. So I'm going to get just a little bit more in the weeds here and granular. So let's say I've got my wedding planning business. I've got maybe a full service package and a coordination package, right? Is the
Yes.
idea. So my website, I don't have to change my website right off the bat, right? So somebody books me for my full service package, okay? So how do I kind of introduce this idea of like the dream package? Like how would that kind of go? Is it, am I on the right track here? Is this the way you're kind of thinking about it? Or
Yeah, that's kind of how that came about. We were just talking about the different packages that we had, and I
okay,
asked my couple, if there's anything that they want to think outside of the box,
okay,
let's think about that. And then that's kind of how it led into doing more, and then talking about, well, if because it started off, we want to walk down an aisle, but we don't want to walk down petals. We want to walk on something hard, so we did
gotcha.
a
Yeah,
surface, and just kind of developing that from the start, I guess, was it came about very organically at that point because I
right,
asked, if you
right,
wanted to do something different, what would you do? And then,
right.
turning it that way. But I didn't really put a package on my site that said anything like that, except the like I kept telling my couples that I would work with that this is what we offer, but then there's also a dream package of something that you want to be creative all on your own, and we'll come up with that together.
How do you so how do you broach the idea of pricing for that package? It's not something that's on your site. By
No.
definition, it's going to vary because everybody's got a different dream. It's going to vary from one couple to the next. So, are you almost kind of co-creating the pricing structure for this package on the like how does that work? It almost sounds like a beautiful upsell opportunity. Like where like not only does it potentially give you more revenue as the planner, but it also is this like catalyst for more creativity. But I don't want to read into like, is that right? How do you approach the pricing?
It does. So what we always tell our couples is it's very custom. So what we'll do is we piece it together line item by line item for a ceremony and do the same thing for the reception. It just it just has to be a so for us to do a stage with flowers on it, this will be this much. And then if we add a canopy on top of it, flowers all over it, then it'd be this much. And then we just kind of build on top of it.
That's really cool. And then you kind of, so they book your full service, say you're having your initial consultation, you're talking, you're kind of brainstorming, you're learning about their desires. And in that context, you kind of raise this idea of like a dream package.
Yes.
And not everybody necessarily says yes to that, right? Some people are like, no, we're good with what we have. But if some people are intrigued and they're like, yeah, that sounds interesting, then you start going down that path, you hear their needs, and then I guess you go and think about what the pricing implications would be and you get back to them with like, here's what the new price would be. Is that kind of the idea?
Definitely. And I do that on my proposal as sorry, I'm jumping a little bit too. I do that on my proposals as a florist, as I mentioned earlier. Like if you
Right.
show me a photo of something, I'll give you the three options of pricing and
Right.
you can choose.
Sure.
So
Sure.
just yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's very innovative. And Darren, what so you've been doing this for, 28 years. You've been in this industry. And I said this in our pre-interview. I really believe that we all have something to teach and we all have tons of stuff to learn. Like you've got decades of a very unique experience. Um, as you kind of reflect on your career, what is one thing that comes to mind, Darren? And don't be overly humble here. You can brag on yourself. What's one thing that you honestly have done well that has really been a factor in the success that you're currently enjoying?
Wow. That's a great question. I've not really thought about it that much. Um,
I just think we all have superpowers. We all have and none of us does everything well, right? I think that's one thing that as like business owners, not just wedding planners, but when you're running a wedding planning business or any kind of business, we all kind of feel like we have to be good at the marketing, we have to be good at like the pricing, we have to be good at doing the wedding planning, we have to be good at everything, but nobody's great at everything. You got to be good at the wedding planning part of it if you're a wedding
yeah.
planner, but in terms of the business side of things, like just yeah, what kind of just comes to your mind just kind of naturally as like something that like really has helped you over the years get where you currently are?
Huh. I guess my biggest thing is I'm a connector. I like connecting people. That's something I do in my business as well. Even if so say for instance, someone sends me a couple and they need help. What I do is I kind of work with them to see where they need to be, what they need to do, and how much their budget is, and then I try to refer them to someone that would fill that need. Because there's a lot of things that I don't do. Like I don't do day of planning. I only do food service. For me, it's I can't be I don't have that hard line where I can stop. I either do all or nothing at all. So I have to be that way. But to me, that's the one thing that I feel like throughout my whole life I've been is a connector. I have people that reach out to me and be like, "Hey, we need this, then this." So I try to refer them to somebody else, and to me, it's a no brainer. By it's so good for the community as well.
How do you do that, Darren? And just to put a fine point on what you're saying, I feel like that is like one of the critical master skills, right? Like there's no world where we can just sit behind the veil of anonymity and just sell our services and people come knocking and buy our wares. Like that's not how the world works. Like the reality is it's all about people. Like every wedding, even if you're the planner of the wedding, you're working with other creative partners, clients, vendors, venues. Like there's other people that are involved. And when you, every dollar you ever get is going to be sent by a person. Like, so tell me a little bit more, Darren, about how you operationalize this mode of being a connector. Like, is it networking events? Is it lunches with people? Like, how do you do that?
Um, so I used to love being throwing parties a lot. So every year I would throw a vendor party for all of my vendors, and just so that we could all connect and get to know each other. And then sometimes I would like to do like, hey, if there's somebody new in the community, invite them to the party so that they can kind of show us what they do and what they bring to the table. Giving everybody just a fair chance sometimes is kind of fun to do and see where people can get creative.
Can I just jump in and ask, and this is more devil's advocate rather than something that I actually believe, but I could think like, hey, Darren, okay, I'm a wedding planner. I hear you on this connecting thing, but like, I'm so busy. How does it help me to throw an event for somebody else that's new that might even ultimately be my competitor in the future? Or how does it necessarily help me to throw a party for vendors? I already know them, they already know me. I've got other things to do. Like, can you unpack? And again, I'm not saying that because like I actually like don't see any value, but in your own sort of words, how is there value in terms of you and your business for doing those types of activities?
Hmm, that's a great question. Uh, I like the value because of the connection that you get with your
Yeah.
vendors.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can go out to have a coffee with somebody, and that's great. But having people over in your personal space and getting to know somebody more personal, and then seeing how people interact together is really great too. Because then, if your vendors get to know each other really well, then they'll work together well.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
then, having that experience of having that same communication on the wedding site the day of is really special too.
I guess then people can feel that like you're showing up with vendors who are more of a
Family,
bonded team. They
yeah,
know
more,
each other, and that's the team that's putting on the production, right? Like almost like a cast on a stage putting on a play, except they know each other, right? It's almost like
right.
yeah,
We're all
no,
playing together. That's why I always, when I send emails out to the vendors, I'm like, okay, here's our list. We're gonna have fun, and this is what we're gonna do, and it's
yeah.
just a fun event.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
It reminds me of the concept of like an ensemble cast on television, right? Like, I was just re-listening to Will Smith's memoir, and he talked about when he was doing The Fresh Prince, like they actually loved each other, they had friendships, and that kind of translates when you're, working
Working
together.
together. Yeah,
Not to
that's a
mention,
really big difference. And a lot of couples do say that, that they can see how we enjoy working with each
oh
other.
wow,
So
yeah,
it does build that, trust between each other.
yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of back to that notion that none of us is an island, and no matter how good you are as a wedding planner, you're never going to show up and be a one person show that makes the whole event great.
Yeah.
Like if the florist and the photographer, these other vendors aren't great, like your job almost is to kind of be that team. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, do you
For
see
sure.
that? Do you think that the wedding planner, like one of their like priorities and jobs and benefits that they bring to the table is kind of bringing this team together? And
Yeah. Like holding the space. To me, that's a one thing that I've learned. Sorry, I'm bringing in my Hawaiian and culture part of it, but that's one thing I've learned. Very first in the beginning was I did a wedding where it didn't really turn out well. Everything kind of changed in the day of,
Mhm.
and I didn't feel good about it, and so I walked away from the situation and walked into right next to the property. There's a little foresty area. I kind of just stood there, touched the tree, grounded myself, and says, you know what? We need to make this better. And with the vendors and everybody that came around, but that's the whole reason was I wasn't really close to the vendors at that wedding that I was doing. Um,
I gotta ask, Darren, touching the trees, touching the ground. You talked about bringing your Hawaiian roots in. Tell me more about that.
just being more grounded, being more um, as a wedding planner. My my whole thing is to bring the energy to the space. For me, I have to be the calm and the knowledgeable person at the property.
Oh, I love it.
I I bring that knowledge and the calmness to the wedding that everybody will want to be instead of being nervous. And working with different people like that is really different. I had a business partner that used to yell at everybody, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and it was just so stressful. So by learning not to be that way was really a great thing.
I love that so much, Darren. And I can tell you, I've talked to other people, and that is something from all perspectives, from the planner to 360, all the different vendors. And it really just resonates with me. Like, I'm just big into meditation and just this notion of not letting the natural chaos of the mind and thinking and excitement and all of this like prevail, right? Like, I
It's
really
very
love
easy.
this notion that like wedding planners should bring a calm, positive energy because you can feel it even if you don't open your mouth, let alone if you're shouting out like, "Come on, everybody!" Like people can almost just feel your energy, and you don't want to be an agent of like chaos and panic, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely not at the wedding.
yeah, is that something that you set your intention? First of all, it seems like I mean that is like the Hawaiian ethos, right? Like things are like cooler, breezy, like, but like, do you feel like do you work at that, or does it
I
is it just natural for you? Like, how do you work at that?
I do. So you I start from the beginning. So, and my flower staff knows it because the first thing that happens is we get the flowers for the
Right,
wedding.
right,
So this is something that this is something that I learned in the very beginning was when we would work on flowers, I would watch a romantic movie
Wow.
And so we'd play this movie while we're processing flowers or working
Wow.
on flowers. And for me, that was, bringing that same energy into what we're working on. And by starting in that, it proceeds to go throughout the whole wedding day.
Wow. So you intentionally set your energy when you're working on the flowers or when you're working on the plans for the wedding? Are you actually trying to like say, okay, I'm getting ready to work on a timeline here and I want to sit down and I don't want to bring an energy of like, anger or something or stress from like another part of my day into this. I want to bring the energy that I want to infuse into this event to every facet of my work on it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, you have to set your intention of what you want the day to be like. And, just by doing that, it really does set your mode for the day. Your couple is maybe panicked, freaked out, stressed, of course. So by going in there, giving them a flower, giving them something to drink, calming them down, being that calm person at the event really does ground your whole day for
And
me.
I feel like we're really hitting on something, Darren, and it's so powerful. It's just not as concrete and easy to discuss and point out as like percentage based pricing. There are these other things where you can point and say that concrete, tangible thing. But here, it doesn't make it any less important. Like, I really find on those days where like I'm in the groove,
Mhm.
and I feel good. I'm rested. I've exercised, I've eaten right, whatever. That there is an energy that I bring to an interaction that allows me to just shape the whole experience and to see opportunities and to fix problems and all of that stuff. Like that energy is everything. So I love this idea of intentionally saying, this is the energy that I want to bring into this experience, and then working at doing that.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the one thing I always tell my couples is if you give me an idea and I know it's not going to work, I'm going to tell you 100% upfront.
Hmm.
Because in the day of, if it doesn't go, it's my fault no matter what. Even if it was your idea, it'll be my fault.
Yep.
So you have to be 100% honest about everything and let them know that, hey, my intention is to make sure you have a beautiful, flawless wedding and that there's no stress.
When you nail it, Darren, what is when you look back at a wedding, you're like, okay, nailed it. Like just we nailed it. What is it that usually allowed you to do that? I mean, we talked about team. So
Mhm.
obviously, no matter how good of a job you do individually, if the other vendors aren't working in unison and in flow, like that's a big factor. What are the other sort of factors that go into allowing you to just nail a wedding?
Hmm. Um, the Having the couple be happy, be a part of it, making sure that they're not stressed about the day, that they're more enjoying it than worrying about it.
How do you
A,
do that?
a couple of things I tell my couples to do is, and I always tell every couple, is the two things I want them to do is the day before their wedding or 2 days before their wedding is to spend the day together, just alone, just the two of them, do a full body massage, go to a spa, spend the time together because that might be the only time that you have this week while everybody's here. Being on Maui, it's different as a destination wedding.
Right.
Everybody shows up on Wednesday and they leave on Friday, or it's something like that. So you can allow your time to have that. You have your personal time together. For me, that's important for my couple because it sets aside the part that they can spend time together and really focus on what is important for the two of them for the wedding day. And that's what I tell all my couples is I want you guys to think about your wedding day together and what is important to you and what you want to enjoy. What experience do you want your friends and family to have? And then get rid of all that stress.
I love that, Darren, because it's funny. What planners tell me, and I just saw a post on Facebook that summed this up perfectly. It was a picture of the planner and it was the bride, it was her bride, was squeezing her. I mean, just squeezing her with gratitude and joy at the end of the wedding day. And the planner's caption was like, "This is my favorite part of being a planner." I think that resonates with a lot of people when you have that client, they're like, "I could not have done this without you. Thank you so much." Right.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious that, like, ultimately, that's the goal, right? Like, forget about everything else. Like, you want your clients at the end, and obviously the rest of the guests too, everybody, but you want your clients to feel like, I'm so happy, I'm so grateful, and I'm filled with love and fulfillment right now, right? Like, so why not do what you're saying and just really focus on strategically cultivating that experience by dialing into them early on?
True. And that's the one thing I always tell people is at the end of that planning process, you either be really great friends and
Yeah,
vacation and do things together and or you keep in contact a lot. It just
yeah.
automatically happens because I mean, if you want to get to know your couple, that's the only way to do it.
It's funny. We talked about what makes weddings go really well, and, unless you're a very different human being than I am, over the last 20 years, you've probably also stepped in a few potholes and learned, because
Yes.
I feel like that is kind of how we grow and learn as humans. But I also feel like one beautiful thing about humanity is we can talk and we have podcasts where we can learn from other people's experiences to avoid some of the mistakes that maybe they made. So, to the extent you're comfortable, Darren, I'd love to
Mhm.
ask, are there any potholes that you stepped in that you feel like are just out there and that you see maybe other planners stepping into that you
Hmm.
can, by sharing your own experience, help them avoid?
That's a great question. Um, wow.
Like maybe a wedding where things just kind of, maybe even looking back, well, I guess you already told me kind of what went wrong with that early wedding where you didn't feel great about it. But are there any other weddings where you say, man, I wish I had done this? Or if you had a time machine, on
I
a previous
know.
interview, if you could go back to the version of you right before that wedding was getting ready to happen, or as you were planning it, and say, "Hey, you might want to not do," like, is there anything like that that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So one of them was I don't do shots anymore at my weddings. No more
Okay.
shots.
Okay.
We tell all of our couples that we don't serve shots at the bar. They can have drinks, but no shots because I've had a wedding where one of their signature drinks was a shot,
Ah.
and the couple, along with three other people, ended up in the bushes at a venue at the ocean,
Oh no. Yeah.
and we couldn't find them when the bus showed up. And so because it was dark, they
Yeah.
had
Yeah. This.
gone
Oh
beyond
my
the
gosh.
perimeters.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I learned that lesson from that. And I've had a couple other stories where I've had a bride that was pretty drunk and fell
Yeah.
off the lanai once, but yeah. So
I swear, there's a book that needs to be written. Like, I just need to, like, you know, stories from planners or something. If I had like just a collection of
yeah,
just the different, I mean, just unbelievable stuff that you don't even think like that happened. Like, but that's really practical though, Darren. I feel like that's something that other people right now, and it may be even more uh, general than just no shots. Like, be mindful in advance, because the job of the planner is to anticipate as many of the potholes as can be anticipated. And one is, not everybody responds to alcohol in the same way. Like, you need to get out in front of, is there anybody here that might, that, because you've been with them, for friends with them for the last 50, and you've been partying. Is there anybody here that we like? How do you kind of approach that more generally, like to kind of cut off any unwanted behavior from intoxication?
yeah. So the bar service is important as well. So
Okay.
they'll let us know if somebody's had too much,
Okay.
but they also they won't serve it. Like they'll water it down a little bit, or
Okay.
they usually do help, or we
Okay.
try to do the best we can. It doesn't happen anymore, but yeah, it used to happen quite a bit.
Yeah, sure. No, it makes sense. It totally,
Yeah,
totally makes
because
sense.
everybody wants to party when they come here. It's
Yeah,
you're on the beach, the sunset, you're enjoying yourselves. It's easy.
absolutely. Absolutely. I want to do a quick little aside, Darren, for those listening. And I knew our time here would go quickly, and I have a couple more questions that I'm very excited to ask you before we wrap up. But I did just want to give a quick aside for folks. If you're a wedding planner, I just mentioned this idea of the wedding planner's job is to anticipate. You can never anticipate everything, but everything that you can anticipate, you should try to do. And hopefully, all of that planning and forethought goes into creating a very detailed and customized timeline for your couple, one that is just as bulletproof as anything could be. And I want people to know, if you're using other tools out there, Timeline Genius is a software that makes it really easy for you to create beautiful, detailed, highly professional timelines. You just put in the information for that specific wedding. We have an AI that generates a detailed initial customized timeline. And then if you need to shift 20 items 15 minutes ahead because you just got that call from the bride saying you need to, you can do that in a button click or two. You can set text reminders for the florist or for any other vendor to go out. It's really, really amazing. So go to timelinegenius.com, watch the video on the homepage, give it a free trial, do the free trial, and I think you'll be blown away by. And there's also a checklist feature set, which is our big addition to the platform over the last year and
Oh,
a half,
cool.
where you can plan the multi-month set of tasks that you need to do going into the wedding. So I always like to do that aside, Darren, because there's still planners out there that may be hearing about us for the first time. But and it ties very naturally to kind of what we're talking about here, making a wedding go well. Um,
Awesome.
um, so another sort of, just kind of riffing, I just feel like we uncovered a nice little practical tidbit of advice around, preempting intoxication and the troubles that can come from that. Is there anything else that you've kind of seen over the years, Darren, that you've kind of just learned after having done so many weddings, that you're like, okay, I'm on the watch out for this, and I've learned not to do this when I'm planning a wedding?
Hmm. I think my another important thing is the bride. With the bride, it's always custom
Hmm.
about how her stress level may be or may not be.
Hmm.
And then it also depends on the family members that are around. Sometimes they're more of a handle.
Right. Right.
So what we try to do is let our couples know that if there is someone that needs that special assistance, to
Right.
make sure we introduce them to my team so that we can have that person be busy with other things and not bothering the couple.
Right.
Um, to me, that's important because I want the couple to have an important, fun evening, just the two of them. Um, and when we're working on site, it's just me and my team that's coordinating with the couple directly for any type of changes or anything like that. And my main thing is with the couples is like nothing's ever set and has to be done this way. Everything's custom, and we can do whatever we want at your time. You know,
I
I've
love
I've
that.
I've done weddings in different types of way where we do the reception first, and then we go to the ceremony, and then we do the actual ceremony itself. So it's to me, it's very by putting people at ease, your couples at ease, by letting them know that anything's custom to them.
I love that. Very, very cool. Well, I'm gonna kind of stay on this similar theme, but make it a little bit broader than just like what you've learned in terms of planning great weddings. I'm going to take a step back and look at the whole forest here of being a business owner. I think that's something that a lot of people miss. Like, it's in the E Myth, by the book The E Myth by Michael Gerber, where he says if you get into wedding planning or dentistry or whatever, you could fall into the trap of thinking, "Oh, I'm a wedding planner." You are, but you're also a business owner, right? As a business owner slash wedding planner, Darren, um, and this, a little personal, but to the extent you're comfortable sharing, would you mind telling me one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome in your professional experience and building your company, how you overcame it and what you learned from it.
Oh,
Again, I assume you're like me and pretty much every other human. I'm sure you've had your challenges, and the trick
yeah.
may be to how do you figure out which one. But anything that's just kind of come to mind where you're like, this was a challenge that I faced in my business, and how you've kind of worked on that, overcome it, dealt with it, etc.
I think there's a few lessons that I've learned. I think the one that resonates with me the most right now that I've learned a lot from is community over competition. From when I started my business in the beginning, when I transitioned into having a business partner, he was really gung ho about doing things a certain way, and he was on the business part of it really great, and so everybody was a competitor to him.
Right.
So we set ourselves apart. Everything was great, but it was that competition mode more than anything else. So we weren't really close with people in the same industry that were doing the same thing. But then once I unfortunately got not working with that business partner anymore, I realized that it's different by having your people that do the same thing be part of your family and work together and collaborate, and then coordinate. Like, say for instance, hey, this person does great with this, I can share this couple with them, just refer it to them because they'll be a better fit. Those kind of things have really helped, by bringing us more together, and it's a lot easier. It's not as stressful. I mean, I live in an island. There's tons of weddings here. There's enough for all of us.
Yeah.
So by being a community is much more beneficial than being a competitor.
I love that, Darren. And this is a very similar sort of question here, and it's a question I always ask as my kind of wrap up here. We've talked about a lot, and I know we've already covered a lot of valuable bases for people. But if you could give one piece of advice, Darren, to everybody listening, especially our planners out here, that would help them as much as possible in building a successful wedding planning company, what piece of advice would you share with people?
Hmm. You have to enjoy what you do. You really have to love it. To me, that's the most important. And then focus on what you love about what you're doing. Maybe that could be the focal point of your business, and then start that way. To me, that's kind of what I'm doing for being the creative part. That's what I focus on, and that's what I share with my couples.
Yeah.
And that gets me excited.
Ask a silly follow-up question, why is that, out of all the things you could give, as advice, all the pieces of advice you could give, why is that top of mind for you, that people really lean into the joy of what they're doing?
Um, I don't know. I guess if you're not enjoying what you do, it's going to show throughout everything that you do.
Yeah.
But by having that joy, you can really share it, and
Yeah.
people see it. I think it really resonates with more people that way.
I love that, Darren. And is there a way for people to, because you are a connector, if people want to get in touch with you, whether they're in Hawaii or elsewhere, what is the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
Either email or call is best for me. Yeah, those are my two
And
favorite.
what's your web address?
Events by Darren Keala.
Gotcha. And you've got a contact form on there, or your
I do.
email? Great.
I do.
Awesome.
Yes, it's Aloha at Events.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, Darren, on behalf of our Timeline Genius community and all of our podcast listeners, I want to say thank you again
Thank
for doing
you.
this. You're just delightful to talk to, great energy and very open. And we, really appreciate you sharing your experience with everybody here.
Thank you, Eddie. I really appreciate it.